Civil 3D provides a means by which to save Civil 3D objects in separate DWGs and then reference them into multiple project files through data shortcut and X-reference functionality. The location where data shortcut functionality can be accessed is in the Toolspace Prospector tab under the Data Shortcuts collection. You'll notice that we already have an active Civil 3D project located under the Dataset folder, and within that folder we have references to an existing ground and a few centerline alignments that we will use throughout the project. You can then reference these data shortcuts, very similar to X-reference functionality, to then use them in your file. Let's take a look at how we are doing this in this current file. You'll notice that you can select the surface in the file. However, if we navigate to the surface in the Prospector tab, you'll notice a little shortcut icon that tells you this surface is not in the file. It is simply a reference to the DWG file that contains the surface object. That said, you can still create contour labels, as you can see here that I've done, and you can display the surface however you want to, applying whatever surface style you need to apply to it. Let's look at the alignments in this file. You'll notice that when I select this alignment, I do not have any of the grips to make edits to. However, I can create my own labels, add labels like station offset labels, however I need to. If anything changes to the Civil 3D object in the drawing file, the labels will update automatically. Also notice that if I select this parcel object, you'll notice the Ribbon External Reference Contextual tab appears, notifying us that this is actually an external reference file. Also notice that I can actually create labels from these parcels, even though they are in a reference. They are not using data shortcut functionality, they are simply using standard AutoCAD XREF functionality. As far as the object types that you can actually create data shortcuts to, you can create data shortcuts to surfaces, alignments, pipe networks, pressure networks, and viewframe groups. And multiple users can access any of the data shortcuts that you create within the project. Data shortcut functionality can greatly reduce the data within one file, making it much easier to design large projects and then referencing the data as you need to. This concludes this video discussing an overview of sharing Civil 3D objects. Data shortcut functionality allows you to reference Civil 3D objects into multiple DWG files. Data shortcuts are located in the Prospector tab in the Data Shortcuts category. Right now I have a current project listed to access data shortcuts from. But let's look at how this functionality actually works. So in the Prospector tab, Data Shortcuts category, simply right-click. The first thing you need to be aware of is your working folder. So wherever your working folder is located is where it's going to initially look for projects that happen to have shortcuts within them. So in this case, right now, my working folder is set to C:, Civil 3D projects. So what I want to do is I'm going to go and create a data shortcuts folder by simply clicking the new data shortcuts project folder. What this does is Civil 3D will create a folder within the Civil 3D projects folder that contains an underscore shortcuts folder. Within that folder, there will be subfolders for each specific object type that you can data shortcut in with separate individual XML files that are basically your pointers to those objects within the file. You can use a project template to create a project folder structure, but in most cases, you'll simply need to get a underscore shortcuts folder and then move it into your project folder. We'll call this one Project 1, and I'll simply click OK. Now let's go ahead and open up C:, Civil 3D projects. Notice how we have a new folder called Project 1, and if I navigate into it, you simply have a underscore shortcuts folder. That is all that is required, along with the subfolders within, to have a project where you can create shortcuts to. As you can see, we have individual subfolders where each individual Civil 3D object will be maintained. It will simply be a small little XML file. That's how you create a data shortcuts folder. To set the current drawing to a specific project, you right-click on Data Shortcuts and choose the Set Data Shortcuts Project folder. All that Civil 3D does is it looks for a folder in your working folder that contains underscore shortcuts and the subfolders within. So I can simply select this folder here, click OK, and that is now my new shortcuts folder. So the drawings can live wherever you want them to live. They do not have to live in the shortcuts folder. Civil 3D will create this little XML file that will automatically point to the file and Civil 3D object within the file. I'm going to set my project back to Project 1. To make a file link to the current project, right-click on the data shortcuts and click on Associate Project to Current Drawing. There's also a batch functionality to associate multiple drawings to a project. Where this helps is if it loses a connection to a data shortcut, you can automatically associate it to this project and Civil 3D will automatically find all the data shortcuts. This concludes this video on an overview of data shortcuts. Data shortcut functionality allows you to reference Civil 3D objects into multiple DWG files. Let's go ahead and create some data shortcuts, and then we'll create a new drawing and use the data shortcuts to reference the Civil 3D objects. First, let's peruse our drawing and look at the objects that are in this file. If we expand the surfaces category, we notice that there's a combined EG that is actually using the detention pond and EG existing ground surfaces to create the one combined EG. We also have a centerline alignment called Bypass 1, and we also have some other centerline alignments that are used for parcel creation. So let's first set our data shortcuts folder to the correct project. So as you navigate down past the actual file name and go to the data shortcuts category, you can simply right-click on there and go to Set Data Shortcuts Project Folder. Notice that the Learning AutoCAD Civil 3D Infinite Skills project is the current project. We now want to change that to Project 1. So we'll go ahead and select Project 1 and click OK. One thing to mention here is that even though this file may not exist in this location, you can set your data shortcut folders to a totally different location. It will automatically store the path and name of the Civil 3D object in the data shortcut file, which we will examine after we create them. Click OK, and now that project is the current project where we will create data shortcuts for. Before we go any further, let's make sure that we set the current project, Project 1, to this DWG file. To do so, simply right-click on the Data Shortcuts category and choose Associate Project to Current Drawing. Notice how we have the option to select from the drop-down, select Project 1, and then click OK. The purpose of assigning a project is it makes it easier to find data shortcuts should the file get moved into a different location on your server. So let's go ahead and save our file, and now let's go ahead and add some data shortcuts to this project. To do so, simply right-click on the Data Shortcuts collection and choose Create Data Shortcuts. Notice that within this dialog box, we can do this all in one shot. So let's just go ahead and toggle on Combined EG, and we'll toggle on all of the alignments by selecting the Alignments category. Notice how they all become selected. If these alignments had profiles, you could also toggle on or off the profiles, but it is definitely recommended that the profiles are created in the alignment file. That way you don't have to worry about them being segregated anyway. Notice the option to pick in the drawing. Should you have many objects in your file, you can simply select the Pick in Drawing button and you'll be able to navigate to it graphically. We'll click OK, and you'll notice that we now have those 4 data shortcuts, Combined EG, and all the alignments. Notice how it's also showing you the location of the data shortcuts right here. So let's investigate as to what truly happened, because knowing what happened can really help you understand how Civil 3D uses these files and what you can do if something goes wrong. So let's navigate to the Project 1 folder that's under Civil 3D Projects, Project 1, and notice how there's only a simple _shortcuts folder. And within this folder, we have subfolders for the different object types that you can create data shortcuts for. So if I expand _shortcuts and choose the alignments folder, you'll notice that these are the 3 little files. Notice how they're small 1 kilobyte XML files that point to the Civil 3D objects within the one file. It is definitely not recommended to open these files and edit them. You should do so using the Civil 3D tools. Let's navigate to the Surfaces folder, and there's the Combined EG. So that's all that is happening when you create data shortcuts. It simply creates these XML files, and within the XML files, they save the folder location and the object name within the file. So let's go through a scenario where we're going to actually create a brand new file with nothing in it, and we'll actually create some data references to the objects within our project. First, let's go to the Application menu and choose New, and navigate to your Civil 3D Projects folder, Learning AutoCAD Civil 3D Infinite Skills, and under Drawings, there's a Learning AutoCAD Civil 3D Infinite Skills.dwt file. Let's go ahead and use that to create our brand new file. This file contains all the styles and settings that we want for our project. Let's navigate to Model Space. And now, let's go ahead and save our file. The reason you save your file is that you cannot create data shortcuts unless you have a true file saved. Let's click the Save tool on the Quick Access toolbar, And within our C:, Civil 3D Projects, Learning AutoCAD Civil 3D Infinite Skills project folder, under the Drawings folder, let's go ahead and save this as Data Shortcut Testing. We now have a new file. The next step is to associate the project to this drawing. So navigate to the Data Shortcuts collection, right-click, Assign Project to Current Drawing, and choose the Project 1 project. Click OK. That project is now assigned to the DWG file. Go ahead and save your file again. Now let's go ahead and create some data references. I'm going to expand the Surfaces category and right-click on Combine EG and Create Reference. So right off the bat, notice how you can actually keep the same name, or you can call it something totally different if you want to. You can even give it a different description and choose a different style than the style defined in the actual DWG file that's being referenced from. So this is a pretty powerful functionality, as you can actually do analysis on different surfaces within a file that is actually referencing it in. This does not affect the file that the Civil 3D object lives in. We'll click OK, do a zoom extents, and there's our surface. Let's navigate to the Prospector tab, Surfaces collection, and notice how there is a shortcut icon next to the existing surface. Notice also that we do not have additional surface editing options because this is a data reference to this surface. So of course, as you would assume, you cannot make any edits within this file. However, we will see in a second that if you make any edits to the file where the data shortcut exists, you will be notified to update the data within your reference files. So let's go ahead and go down to the Data Shortcuts collection. Let's reference in the Bypass 1 alignment. So I'll click on Create Reference. Notice again that you can actually go in here and give it a different name if you wanted to, as well as a different style. I'll keep the same exact style, but again, you can change what labeling you see as well. Click OK, and there's our alignment referenced in. Notice that when I select this file, no grips appear. This is because this reference is, of course, in a different DWG file, just like a reference file. Let's go ahead and actually open this file and make an edit to the alignment to see what happens. So, with this alignment selected, I can now simply right-click and choose Open Source Drawing. That opens the source file where the alignment or Civil 3D object that you're referencing exists. I'm going to simply move this out a few feet, like so. I will save my file, and now I'll go back to the other file by using Quick View, and notice that in the lower right corner you will get a blue notification very similar to a reference file that this shortcut has been changed. I will click the Synchronize button, and immediately the update will appear. If you get an error about the source object for this reference has changed, simply select the appropriate option. I'll go ahead and say Update the reference name, and that's because the surface name had a different name than the one that was in the actual DWG file. As you can see there, it updates automatically, and we're good to go. So data shortcuts provide very powerful functionality in that all Civil 3D objects do not need to live in one drawing. You can create as many drawings as necessary based on project collaboration and the size of your project to make working with Civil 3D objects faster and more efficient. This concludes this video discussing using data shortcuts. Data shortcut functionality allows you to reference Civil 3D objects into multiple DWG files. But let's say you want to remove shortcuts or copy the actual Civil 3D object into your drawing and lose the reference. How do you do that? First, let's look at my file. In the Prospector tab, you'll notice I have a surface that has a shortcut icon that tells you that it is an object that is being referenced by a data shortcut. I also have some alignments that are also following that functionality. To synchronize, promote, or open the Civil 3D object, simply select it, and in the ribbon, you'll be able to synchronize it, which will synchronize it to the latest updates in the file that it's referencing. You can open the source file, which will allow you to actually make edits to it, very similar to OpenXRef, and you can promote the data reference. Well, let's go ahead and select my alignment. When I select this one, let's go ahead and promote this data reference, and notice in the Prospector tab what will happen. When I promote it, you no longer have a shortcut, and notice how the grips became available. So now this Civil 3D object, Bypass 1, is now available for me to make edits to and is no longer referencing the other data shortcut. So that's how you can promote and copy Civil 3D objects that are being referenced from a data shortcut. If you wanted to remove a data shortcut from your project, navigate to the data shortcut category, simply expand to the object you want to remove, and simply right-click on it and remove it from your project. One thing also to note, I'm going to minimize Civil 3D. In the Start menu, All Programs, Autodesk category, AutoCAD Civil 3D 2013, there is a Data Shortcuts editor. And this is a really great utility that enables you to make global changes to any of your data shortcuts if, let's say, the path of a file changes. Simply point your Data Shortcuts folder to where your project is located. In this case, I'll point to the Project 1. Click OK. It will automatically list all of the Civil 3D objects that are being data shortcutted within this project. The way that you change any of the pathing is you simply select the tool Find and Replace, and you can select any part of the path and replace it with whatever path is the new path. This concludes this video discussing removing and promoting data shortcuts. In this video, we will discuss labeling reference files. If you'd like to follow along with this video, please open the file 0705 labelingreferencefiles.dwg located in the training folder as discussed in the Working with this Dataset video. So, along with data shortcuts, Civil 3D also enables you to label some Civil 3D objects not through a data shortcut, but through XREFs. So, as you can see in my drawing, if we look at the Toolspace Prospector tab, I have no surfaces, I have no alignments, nothing under my sleeve. If I select what I have in my file, you'll notice that it is an XREF. Now, in this XREF, I have a Civil 3D surface displayed and a bunch of parcels. I can actually use Civil 3D labeling to annotate these Civil 3D objects. So in the Annotate tab, Label and Tables panel, I'll choose the Add Labels dropdown, and then I'll go to Surface, and you could choose one of the default tools, but it's always a good idea to choose the Add Surface Labels or the top one, which will actually allow you to pick a style to display the labels. I'll choose the Contour Multiple Interval, select my styles, and if I want to choose none for a minor, let's choose none, choose Add, and then I'll simply pick my first point, and I'll go across all the contours I want to label. Now, although I have not selected a surface yet, it's going to know that this surface is in a reference. I'll define my length along the contours to be 300 feet, and just like that, I now have labels all the way across my surface. And again, this surface is in a reference. I'll choose my contour label line, right-click, select Similar, and I'll turn the visibility off. And just like that, we now have our labels. Let's look at these parcels. So in this same exact dialog box, I can just choose the feature that I want to annotate, and I'll choose Parcels. And then I'll go ahead and select Multiple Segments. Choose the correct line and curve label style, and then I'll simply click Add, and then all I have to do is select the area label and define the direction that I want the labels to be placed. And just like that, I am placing my labels. This is really cool functionality. So you do not need to place data shortcuts for every object if you simply require some labeling for those objects. Note that if you do freeze the layer XREF is on, it will freeze the XREF, but it does keep the labels. This concludes this video on labeling reference files.